Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is
Murder Coaster.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we bring you a tale both ancient and modern, both spiritual and material. A heartbreaking story, because it involves the loss of a soul with so much potential that could have become so many things and accomplished so much, yet was cut down long before their prime. On the surface, we see another story of hate and murder, but piece that fragile mirror back together, and we go back to cultures as ancient as time. Today, we present to you the tragic tale of two spirits. Fred Martinez, one of the youngest hate crime victims in modern history.
Let's begin. Prologue. The Nádleehi. According to Navajo legend, in the beginning of time was the Black World, the first world, a world of darkness, in each corner of which was a cloud, one black, one white, one blue, and one yellow. The black cloud represented the female being, whereas a child sleeps when being nursed, so life slept in the darkness of the female being. The white cloud represented the male being. He was the dawn, the light which awakens. Yet they had no definite form. The creatures of the first world are thought of as the mist people, and changed from men to beasts, birds, and reptiles.
There was also the coyote, first angry, as well as the great coyote who was formed in the water. Then more beings came to be. The wasp people who knew the secret of shooting evil and harmed others. And the black ants who killed each other.
Because of the strife in this black world, first man, first woman, and the coyote, called first angry, followed by all the others, climbed up from the world of darkness to the second, or blue world. But the animals of the blue world were at war with each other, and there was much fighting and killing. So the first four found an opening in the world of blue haze, and they climbed through this and into the third world, the yellow world.
A great river crossed this land from north to south. It was the female river. There was another river crossing it from east to west, and that was the male river. And the name of this place where the female river and the male river intersected was called the Crossing of the Waters.
The beings were happy in the yellow world until the day Coyote took Water Monster's baby, and Water Monster made it rain and rain until the water rose and the land began to flood. When first man saw the coming of the water, he sent word to all living beings, and he told them to come to the mountain called Sisnajin, and to bring with them all of the seeds of the plants used for food.
The water rose steadily, and the beings began to climb up a reed, and at the top, they discovered the fourth world, the white world.
First man was not satisfied with the fourth world. It was a small, barren land, and the great water had soaked the earth and made the sowing of the seeds impossible. There were also monsters who hurt people. A horned monster that chased people and killed them with his horns. There was a monster that kicked people off the edge of a cliff. Another monster killed people by staring at them until they were under his spell.
First man and first woman had a child named Changing Woman. Changing Woman had twin boys, Monster Slayer and Born for Water. Monster Slayer went out and killed the great one-horned monster, and killed a monster each and every day until the last of the monsters were dead. But when he thought the land was freed of all evil, he spied 4 ugly strangers. They were cold, hunger, poverty, and death, and straightway he went to destroy them.
Cold was an old woman, freezing and shivering. "You may kill me if you wish," she said. "But if you do, it will always be hot. There will be no snow and no water in the summer. You will do better to let me live."
"You speak wisely, my grandmother," he answered. "And so, we still have the cold."
"If you kill me," said Hunger, "the people will all lose their appetites. There will be no more pleasure in feasting and eating."
And so, the slayer let him live.
Poverty was an old man in filthy garments. "Kill me," he said, "and put me out of my misery. But if you do, your old clothes will never wear out. The people will never make new ones. You will all be ragged and dirty like me."
So the slayer spared his life. And Death was old and bent and wrinkled, and the slayer determined to kill her.
"If you slay me," she said, "your people will never increase. The worthless old men will not die and give up their places to the young. Let me live, and your young men will marry and have children. I am your friend, though you know it not."
"I will let you live, my grandmother," he said, and so we still have death. In Navajo legend, the genders of the first humans were made of earthly elements. Turquoise composed the penis, and the cowrie shell was used to create the vagina.
Traditionally, Navajo recognized 4 basic genders. The first gender is Azdazan, or feminine woman. The next was Hastin, or the masculine male. The third is the nádleehi, or the feminine man, one born as a male but who functions in the role of a woman. And then there is the berdash, or masculine woman, who are born biologically female but function as a man in society and conducts life as a man.
It was understood that these 4 genders are something that cannot be changed in a person, not even by the person themselves, as it is a holy power which has been given to them. And people were not judged by gender and to whom they were sexually attracted to. They were only judged by how they gave to society, how they treated children and the elders.
Because these latter genders contain 2 identities that function as one together, those who fall into them are often called two-spirits.
While the notion of 4 basic genders goes back ages in the Navajo culture, the term two-spirit is relatively new.
The term two-spirit came about in 1990 at the 3rd Annual Intertribal Native American, First Nations, Gay and Lesbian American Conference, held in Winnipeg, and has been ascribed to both Albert McLeod of the Nisi-Chawaoskik Cree and Myra Laramie of the Fisher River Cree, who says that the phrase came to her in a dream.
While the notion of the nádleehi, or two-spirit people, has long been revered in many Native American tribes, the Europeans, who arrived in what they called the New World, did not understand or tolerate this concept and immediately began persecuting them. Spanish conquistadors throwing two-spirit people into pits with war dogs where they were torn apart and eaten alive.
And as Christianity began to take over, the traditional Navajo concept of 4 genders was actively trying to be erased. as were nearly all the native traditions, including their languages. By the late 1800s, tens of thousands of native children were being separated from their families and forced into boarding schools. By the 1920s, these children of boarding schools had lost their language, their culture, their ways, and yet they often couldn't speak English well either, and couldn't fit into the society of the European settlers. They existed between two worlds.
Despite this, two-spirit peoples still persisted.
And most famously, Wiwa, a highly respected transgender leader from the Zuni Nation who became their ambassador to Washington. This revered two-spirit ambassador was much beloved by her people, and there are many photographs of her performing traditional female roles, such as weaving, when she wasn't representing her people in Washington, D.C.
Often, the two spirits were herbalists, negotiators, healers, matchmakers. They counseled and were caretakers of orphaned children. There was a place for them, and far from being outcasts, they filled much-needed roles in their society.
And into the 2000s, those identifying as nádleehi or two-spirit could still be found, like Fred Martinez, a Navajo teenager in Cortez, Colorado, by the four corners where Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah meet.
Fred identified as a gay male, went by the pronouns he and him, but was very fluid with his gender. Some days he dressed like a boy. Other times he would don makeup and a purse, wear a dress and effeminate shoes. At times he'd call himself Frederica or even Beyonce in honor of his favorite singer. But there was no strict gender conformity. With each new day, Fred would express himself as he felt.
Fred was raised by his mother and 5 older brothers, all of whom loved him very much. He was an artist and musician and active in the Native American church. He identified as a nádleehi and may have grown up to fulfill the traditional nádleehi role of healer, ambassador, and caretaker to the parentless, but he never had the chance.
On June 16, 2001, just 3 months after his 16th birthday, Fred told his mother he was going to the fair with some friends and never returned.
His frantic mother called the police and reported him missing, though little was done. It appears, like so many cases of both Native and queer missing peoples, he was seen as less than and written off as a possible runaway.
Five days later, the body of Fred Martinez was found in a canyon by 2 little boys hunting lizards, less than a quarter-mile away from his home. Despite the fact that the police had been informed there was a missing teenager, no one believed these lizard-hunting children at first. Then, one of their fathers came looking and was horrified by what he found.
There were pools and pools of blood, terrible signs of a great struggle, scratch marks in the earth, bandanas strewn about.
Fred lay on his back, dragged down into a dusty ravine. His face and head had been completely obliterated with a rock. He was so unrecognizable that dental records had to be used to identify him.
Fred Martinez, proud Navajo artist and musician, who identified as nádleehi, a feminine man born in the body of a male but fulfilling traditional female roles, had been murdered, one of the youngest victims of a hate crime in modern history. This is his story.
Chapter 1. Little Fred.
Fred C. Martinez Jr. was born on March 15, 1985, the youngest of 5 sons to Fred C. Martinez Sr. and Pauline Mitchell in Tuba City, Arizona.
This area where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet is a meshing of cultures, distinctly Southwest American. There are Navajo and Ute native peoples and traditions, but also a strong Latino presence and many of Mexican heritages, all of which is thoroughly mixed and steeped in cowboy culture.
Fred Sr. was a Pacific Railroad worker and cowboy. Fred Jr. was a child aspired to be like his father, wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and had a great love of horses.
But in the early 1990s, when Fred Jr. was still in grade school, his parents divorced, and he moved with his mother and brothers to Cortez, Colorado.
The family lived in a double-wide trailer in a trailer park, and obviously it was a struggle for Pauline to raise 5 boys as a single mother, but she did the best she could, working as a motel housekeeper, and despite their poverty, they were a joyous and happy family.
Little Fred, the baby of the family, was full of love, a roly-poly, round-faced boy with dimples that shone when he smiled. Fred loved to hug and to have his picture taken with his mother, always asking his older brothers, "Take a picture of Mom and me doing this. Take a picture of Mom and me doing that," so that there are lots and lots of photos of happy little Fred hugging his mother, Pauline.
While his father was a Christian, Fred felt more drawn to the spirituality of the native peoples and embraced his Navajo culture. He was a member of the Native American Club at his school and active in the Native American Church. He'd spent a lot of time way out in the desert of Monument Valley, a very rural place where the culture is very traditional and centered on native beliefs, a place where he wanted to collect eagle feathers and make traditional fans. And here again we see this crossroads and meshing of cultures, as Cortez, where he lived, was more urban, a city and border town of cheap hotels and bars, fast food and liquor stores.
Fred loved music. He played the clarinet and loved to dance. And he was also an artist who would draw and paint. His mother says,
"He was a typical boy. He used to love dressing up like a cowboy, playing with toy cars, loved horses."
But in middle school, he began to change as a more feminine side of him emerged.
One of the first things was the bandana.
Everyone wears a bandana. They're very unisex or gender neutral and ubiquitous to the region and culture. Cowboys use them to keep dust out of their mouths. Workers use them to keep their hair back or sweat from getting in their eyes. And folks of all sorts keep them in their back pocket to be used from everything from blowing your nose to cleaning up a spill.
Fred would roll up his bandana and wear it as a headband, but high on his head, like a 1950s rocker girl, causing his hair to fluff out behind it, a style that was distinctly feminine.
Then, as his mother said,
all of a sudden he started wanting to wear makeup.
When she asked the reason behind this transformation, Fred simply stated that he liked it, and it made him feel comfortable.
Fred began wearing his mother's makeup and then asked if he could wear one of her old purses. Pauline loved her son unconditionally and would do anything to make him happy, and agreed.
Then one day Fred sat his mother and his brothers down at the kitchen table and had a frank discussion with them about this new identity that was emerging from within him.
Fred explained to his family that he did not want to choose between being a boy and a girl. He wanted to be both. He self-identified as a gay male, but in order to be his authentic self, he wanted to also display his feminine side as well. He had two spirits within him that joined together to become one.
He explained how he was embracing the Navajo concept of nádleehi, a gender fluidity that transcends limited characterization. Fred described himself to his family as nádleehi, a spiritual, sexual, and gender identity that would provide him with a dignified sense of his native history.
His family told him that they loved him and would always accept him and respect him. But his older brother told him that he needed to be careful, to watch out for those who would hate him for this identity. And as his brother expressed his concern about the dangers of being two-spirit, a chill ran through their mother.
Fred's best friend since elementary school was a girl named Robin Flores, who also accepted his two-spirit identity. As she'd say,
He would come to my house and I'd help him curl his hair. Or I'd help him put his makeup on. We'd try on clothes together.
said Fred wanted most of all to be beautiful. And though he was strikingly beautiful as he was, high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes, perfect skin, lips like a blooming rose, he strove to make himself even more so. He was excellent with makeup, fashion, hair, and he began to harbor a desire to become a fashion designer or a hairstylist.
He got his ears pierced, then shaved his eyebrows and began wearing eyebrow pencil.
And he longed to escape the Four Corners. He wanted to go to California, to San Francisco and Los Angeles, and was hopeful and felt he was destined for great things. He told his friends he was confident he would appear in Teen People magazine one day. A darkly prophetic hope, as after his murder, an article about him did appear there.
Things went sour after Fred graduated middle school and started to attend Montezuma Cortez High School, where he was not accepted by either the students or the school officials.
Robin says he was constantly picked on and bullied, called horrible slurs, yet he never fought back, never said anything, just silently took the abuse. Robin says she became very protective of Fred because he was so gentle and kind. And when she saw people pick on him, it pissed her off to no end.
Meanwhile, Pauline stated how her son's appearance prompted school officials to send him home, quote, more times than I can remember.
Once the school principal sent him home because of his shoes, very girly purple heels. And his mother went to the school to defend her son and saw a girl there wearing the same exact shoes. Pauline demanded to know why that student could wear the shoes and her child couldn't. It made no sense. Fred was just being himself.
As Pauline says, quote, I figured if you go to school, it doesn't matter how you dress or whether you're poor. You're there to learn.
But the constant bullying and abuse from his peers and the callousness and lack of empathy from school officials began to wear on Fred, and he attempted to take his own life, eating an entire bottle of pills. He was rushed to the hospital where he had his stomach pumped.
When he recovered, his mother asked him, Why? Why would you do that?
Fred simply told her it was because people hated him so much.
Both his family and his friends rallied around, comforted him, supported him, and in the end it all made him stronger made him embrace himself and his true nature.
Then Fred began wearing a bra he would stuff with bandanas.
Robin says she remembers the first time she saw him doing so, that he was running across a field toward her, beaming and happy, and she told him, "Wow, you look amazing."
Fred's life, in so many ways, echoed the legends of his Navajo culture. He'd emerged from all these different worlds, born in Arizona, coming to Colorado, going from his father's cowboy Christianity to his native Navajo roots, then coming to a place where the female river and the male river crossed.
He stood upon crossroad after crossroad, gender crossroads, cultural crossroads, rural, desert, and urban city, and in that final white world he found himself in, there did, in fact, lurk horrible and terrifying monsters, just like the myths of old.
Chapter 2, Sean Murphy.
Bitch, I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back, tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression, it's all that I wanted. The phone and affection, I summon and dub it. Cause bitch, I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back, tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression, it's all that I wanted. The phone and affection, I summon and dub it.
Sean Murphy was born in Cortez, Colorado, but when he was a child, his family moved 50 miles south to Farmington, New Mexico, where he grew up.
Sean, too, was representative of the multiple cultures of the Four Corners region, living in the intersection of farmers, rednecks, cholos, gangbangers, cowboys, hip-hop, country, and mariachi music, ranchers, guns, drugs, and outlaws.
But while Fred grew up in a family filled with love and acceptance, where he embraced art and his native culture, Sean Murphy lived in a world of hate and anger, fueled by methamphetamine and violence.
Sean's best friend from childhood was Clint Sanchez. Their families knew each other and they were so close, they called each other cousins. Sean says they were both born into the violent world of gangs and drug dealing. That violence, guns, and speed were just a way of life for them.
By the time Sean turned 18, he already had a lengthy rap sheet with a number of assault charges, was on probation, and had fathered 2 children.
There are home videos of Sean out there you can watch. Him with a shaved head and in a wife beater, looking like a little psycho as he shows off various weapons, shotguns and pistols. A deadly combination of redneck and vato gangbanger, fusing the worst elements of each culture.
In the summer of 2001, Sean and Clint were teenage methamphetamine dealers looking to have fun and make some money. So they decided to hop into Clint's pickup truck and head out of Farmington, New Mexico, over the border and into Colorado, to Sean's old stomping grounds of Cortez, where the yearly regional rodeo and carnival were taking place.
They drove through the New Mexico desert on Route 491 into Colorado, joining Route 160, the Trail of the Ancients, through the Ute Mountain Indian Reservation, finally coming to Cortez, run-down streets filled with cheap motels and honky-tonk bars, fast food joints, and then rolled on out to the dusty fairgrounds, Ferris wheel lights and the piped organ sound of a merry-go-round, and the staticky grumble of a rodeo announcer.
The 2 18-year-olds were no strangers to the town and worked at plying their speed to the locals, meeting up with fellow teens, including a very effeminate Navajo boy named Fred that was wearing makeup and a bra.
From there, the two speed merchants headed to a local party. And here too, in the cigarette smoke and drunken chatter, they encountered the Navajo boy wearing makeup. Eventually, Sean and Clint decided to head to a friend's apartment where they were going to crash for the night.
As Clint's pickup truck rattled over the streets, beneath the neon of flashing vacancy signs and the golden arches of McDonald's, again they saw the effeminate Native American boy Fred, walking along, hands tucked deep in his pockets, head down.
They called out to him, "Hey, where you going? You need a ride?"
Fred told them he was headed to a convenience store right by their friend's apartment, so they offered him a ride and he hopped inside.
Clint says it was no big deal. They talked a little and then dropped Fred off at the convenience store. And that was that. He didn't think anything of it.
Soon after arriving at the apartment of their friend, Sean said he was going out to try to find some weed.
20 minutes later, he arrived back, covered in blood.
Jesus, what happened? Clint asked his friend.
Sean just replied that he'd gotten into a fight and had to bug smash some guy, telling Clint that the guy was laying out in the pits, a dark area of desert and canyon on the outskirts of town.
Bug smash is a term for violent obliteration, like when a bug hits the windshield of a car.
Clint would later say he assumed it was a fair fight with some stranger who'd started with him. As they considered themselves family as well as part of a gang and were partners in meth dealing, Clint became protective, telling Sean to put all of his blood-soaked clothes and shoes in a bag and take a shower.
Afterwards, they loaded the bag of bloody clothes and shoes into Clint's old pickup and skipped town, headed back to Farmington, New Mexico.
Chapter 3, the Cortez Regional Rodeo and Carnival.
What would people that know me think of me? If they had a glimpse into reality, the one I stare at each and every day. Would they be scared of me? Or might they be proud of me? Would they have nothing to say? Hey, 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 I ain't the ghost that you think I am. Hey, 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 ain't no tall drink of water for Uncle Sam. I'm no idealist, I think myself a realist.
Fred Martinez was very sweet and loving, a kind boy. He didn't like confrontation, always backed down from a fight, and simply ignored insults and silently endured bullying. But he did have a wild side.
He was 16 years old, with an adventurous heart. Like most teenagers, he wanted to live life and to party. He was sexually active and carried condoms in his pocket. He drank alcohol and enjoyed smoking the weed, which he may have seen as a sacred herb, and carried rolling papers on him.
So when the rodeo and carnival came to town, Fred and his best friend Robin Flores, as well as a few other teens, hit it up.
They had a great time, eating cotton candy and riding the zipper, tossing rings onto antique Coke bottles for the chance to win a stuffed animal, roaming the livestock exposition, looking at the goats and prized pigs, watching the rodeo as cowboys strode bucking broncos.
On the third and final night of the fair, Fred hugged and kissed his mother, said he was going to the rodeo and would be back later. She never saw him again.
At the carnival grounds, Fred told his friend Robin he wasn't feeling well, that he had an upset stomach, which would make sense after all the junk fair food they had been eating. And Fred said he was going home.
Only he wasn't going home. He was going to party.
Some unruly teens that Robin didn't approve of and thought were jerks were having a big old shindig, and Fred snuck away from his childhood friend to go live life and get a little wild, have some fun.
Afterwards, Fred was walking to the store before heading home when two guys he'd met at the party asked him if he wanted a ride, and he hopped in with them. They dropped him off, but a short time later, as Fred was on his way home, he encountered one of the guys out walking around, as if looking for him, a guy named Sean Murphy.
Fred apparently had no idea he'd come across a monster, and Changing Woman's son, Monster Slayer, was not there to protect him.
What exactly happened next, we don't know. But examining the crime scene, we can make assumptions.
The two went to an area called the Pits, a dark area devoid of streetlights, of canyons and dried stream beds.
It appears at some point Fred attempted to flee, running down a gravel road in a canyon between two sandstone cliffs. He climbed atop a rock pile and attempted to scale a cliff, his frantic efforts evident in the claw marks he left in the soft sandstone.
At the top of this cliff, the lights of the trailer park where he lived could be seen less than a quarter mile away. But he didn't make it to the top. Instead, he was dragged down into some bushes and hit in the back of the head with a rock, leaving a small puddle of blood.
It is unclear if he crawled from this area or was dragged, but eventually he slipped down into a hollow between two rocks. During this time, his bra was ripped off, and the bandanas that filled it were scattered across the desert floor.
There, as he lay on his back, staring upwards into the night sky, Sean Murphy picked up another rock, a very large one, weighing around 25 pounds, and began to smash 16-year-old two-spirit Fred Martinez in the face, over and over and over, smashing out his front teeth, obliterating his beauty, the pretty face with the hand-drawn eyebrows and delicate mascara, the smooth, perfect skin and high cheekbones, erasing his identity and covering himself in blood as he did so. Then, leaving Fred there for the flies, buzzards, and creatures of the high desert.
When Fred didn't return home, his mother and brothers searched everywhere they thought he could be, called his friends, and repeatedly called the local police department. All to no avail. Fred was gone, seemingly disappeared into the warm summer night.
5 days later, a group of children hunting lizards found his bludgeoned corpse decomposing in the sagebrush and sand.
Meanwhile, back in Farmington, New Mexico, while Clint claims his friend Sean Murphy told him he'd beaten some random guy in a fight, Sean himself was going around bragging he'd, quote, bug smashed a hoto. Hoto being slang for a gay person.
Word quickly spread, and eventually an anonymous informant called Crime Stoppers, a crime hotline, and said that Sean Murphy was going around bragging that he'd killed a gay person.
So police in Farmington put out a surveillance team to watch Sean Murphy and his meth-dealing gangbanger buddy, Clint Sanchez.
As they trailed Clint, what should he do but drive his pickup truck on a circuitous route to an alley where, after casting furtive glances about, he threw a bag into a dumpster.
When authorities retrieved the bag, they found it was filled with blood-soaked clothing and shoes.
Sean and Clint were then rounded up and brought in for questioning. You can find these videos of the interrogation. Pretty pathetic stuff.
In a later interview, Clint says he was from the streets and raised in a life of gangs and crime where you didn't snitch. So at first he said nothing. But when they informed him that the body of a petite 16-year-old transgender youth had been discovered, he realized it most likely hadn't been a fair fight and quickly ratted his cousin out.
So much for not snitching. He folded fast as hell.
And Sean Murphy himself confessed.
His story was that Fred approached him, asking him if he wanted to go smoke some weed in the pits. And when they got there, Fred attacked him.
Sean said Fred was incredibly strong and ruthless, beating him senseless. And in the melee, Sean managed to grab a rock and hit Fred in the back of the head.
But Fred leapt back up, now more pissed off, coming at him in a rage, and Sean had no choice but to start hitting Fred in the face over and over just to keep him down. Sean said his life was in danger. He was only protecting himself.
Fred's best friend Robin doesn't believe any of that, of course, finds it utterly ridiculous. She claims that Fred was actually afraid of the dark and wouldn't have wanted to go down to the pits, that if they were going to smoke weed, they'd just duck into an alley.
She claims that the only way Fred would have gone down into the pits is if it was a sexual encounter, what she called a hookup.
And Fred was sexually active and carrying condoms with him, and his bra had been ripped from him as well, the bandanas used to stuff it blowing about in the desert wind.
Sean Murphy was most likely high out of his mind on crystal meth, and crystal meth is well known to make some folks incredibly horny. Had it awoken something inside of him he was violently ashamed of?
Fred Martinez was very good-looking, beautiful, in fact, and he strove to make himself look beautiful. He had both that androgynous look you see in 70s rock stars like David Bowie, as well as a glamorous and feminine persona and energy.
Could Sean Murphy, tough, macho, wannabe gangbanger, have gone to the pits with Fred on a hookup? Could they have been kissing, making out, when suddenly Sean became violently ashamed? We don't know. But perhaps the actual words that Sean uses during his confession to the police can give us a clue.
Here is what Sean Murphy told police about the night he beat Fred Martinez's head in with a rock.
I was scared of a gay guy, okay? And I didn't want to admit it. I did whatever I fucking had to get away. I have never had nobody like that overpower me the way he did.
I have never had nobody like that overpower me the way he did. Remember, Fred was petite, skinny, and always avoided confrontation, hated fighting. Sean Murphy was a known scrapper and fighter, a speed freak who lifted weights. Knowing that, it's hard to imagine any other scenario where he wasn't overpowered by Fred's sexuality and beauty.
Chapter 4, Post-Mortem.
I watch the day's final hour, wandering on my ears, the ones that pass me by, and the one that is here. And I suppose it's somewhere in the darkest corner of my thought. What a year's coming in hard. I was sweating drops of blood, crying out to my father, saying I know what needs done. And I swear that I won't falter, but ain't there any other way that will not lead to my crucifixion? Or is the world really in that much need of fixing? I was returned no reply. I took a deep breath and sigh, wandered heavy into a blood-drenched sky. I ain't done nothing wrong, and I know I never will, unless I sin this night before I am killed. I was betrayed with a
At the funeral, 2 framed photographs of Fred were placed on the casket. One of Fred as a high school boy, one as Fred displaying his feminine side in makeup with his hair curled. The 2 photographs an enigmatic metaphor of his 2 spirits and nádleehi soul.
In Navajo tradition, after a death, for 4 days, you do not mention the deceased's name, as they need the time to depart from this world and move on. Speaking their name will call them back to this realm. And so, for 4 days after his body was laid to rest in the earth, his friends, family, and loved ones did not speak his name.
Clint Sanchez was found guilty of accessory to murder and received only 36 months of probation, though many believe he was much more involved than he claims.
Sean Murphy was originally charged with first-degree murder, which could have brought him the death penalty, but he eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
After the murder, the city of Cortez, Colorado was flooded with reporters, bringing the case nationwide attention.
Judy Shepard, the mother of Matthew Shepard, a gay college student who had suffered a horrible death at the hands of 2 homophobic men in Wyoming in 1998, came to Cortez that August to attend a vigil that was held for Fred.
The case of Matthew Shepard is famous as it helped galvanize the LGBTQ movement and shed light on hate crimes, inspiring a number of films, novels, plays, songs, and other works, including The Laramie Project, a 2000 play and 2002 film.
Aspen Emmett, a reporter for the Cortez Journal, wrote extensively about the killing and described the many community reactions in an article she wrote for the Four Corners Free Press on the 10th anniversary of the killing, saying,
"The weeks following Fred's death saw a frenzied, ever-evolving community discussion about gender identity and the concept of hate crimes. One reader kept a running tally of how often I wrote the word homosexual in each article, stating that it was offensive, and she was sure there is a flaw in everyone and no one wants to bring it out in the open." Another letter, written by a local pastor, stated that there is no such thing as gay, and society should not be asked to accept or tolerate gender differences.
Indeed, not only was there a lot of local intolerance, many, including the local police, blatantly refused to see it as a hate crime.
Cortez Police Chief Lane complained that gay rights activists, especially those from out of town, are, quote, trying to turn this whole thing into a big political issue.
District Attorney Joseph W. Olt Jr. simply stated, quote, "It may have been a hate crime, or it may not have been," and declined to comment on whether investigators had found indications of anti-gay bias.
Carolyn Wagner, National Vice President of Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, had spent a month in Cortez comforting Martinez's mother and said, quote, "It fills me with rage. We want bias-motivated violence to stop. And one of the ways to stop it is to publicly call it what it is and send a strong message that it will not be tolerated."
In 2009, PBS made an excellent documentary about the case called Two Spirits, which became the highest-rated film of the PBS Independent Lens season and has received multiple awards. It was honored by President Obama in a White House reception and shown to numerous officials in his administration.
The crossroads young Fred Martinez stood on were incredibly dangerous for numerous reasons. Not only was he gay and non-binary, he was also a Native American, two elements of society which often are both targeted and not investigated by authorities.
Out of the more than 300 transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming deaths due to fatal violence reported by the Human Rights Campaign since 2013, about a third of them are still unsolved.
A recent FBI report found that in 2022, there was a 13.8% increase in hate crimes based on sexual orientation, and a striking 32.9% surge in those targeting gender identity compared to the previous year.
So it's very clear that there is an increasing rate of violence against LGBTQ plus people. But queer people being targeted for who they are isn't new at all, and neither is a lack of investigation into cases involving queer people.
We have covered many cases where investigators failed to do their job because of anti-gay biases. From freeway killers Randy Kraft and Patrick Kearney, whose murder sprees were allowed to continue for years because their victims were gay, to Jeffrey Dahmer, who actually had a victim returned to him by police.
Congress passed the first federal hate crimes law way back in 1968 because, for much of United States history, local law enforcement officials, especially in the Jim Crow South, refused to investigate or prosecute lynchings and other race-based crimes.
Today, a hate crime is defined by the FBI as a violent or property crime, such as murder, arson, assault, or vandalism, that is, quote, motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity.
In addition to the federal status, 46 states and the District of Columbia now have hate crime laws, but these laws differ in significant ways. All cover bias based on race, ethnicity, or religion, but only 34 states and DC cover sexual orientation. Only 33 states and DC cover gender, and only 20 states and DC cover gender identity and expression.
In 2010, Congress passed the landmark Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, named for two victims of horrific crimes based on their identities. Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old gay student who we mentioned before, was beaten and murdered in Wyoming, and James Byrd Jr., a 49-year-old black man, was dragged to his death behind a truck by 3 white supremacists in Texas.
This Shepard-Byrd Act changed federal hate crime law in several important ways. It removed the requirement that to qualify as a hate crime, the victim must have been participating in a federally protected act, such as voting, and it expanded the existing hate crime law to include crimes motivated by a victim's actual or perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability.
It also required the FBI to add gender and gender identity as categories of hate crimes it tracks, and gave the federal government greater flexibility to prosecute hate crimes that local authorities choose not to pursue.
Chapter 5. Parole.
In September of 2019, Sean Murphy received parole after serving less than half his time for the murder of Fred Martinez.
Kathy Rana, a longtime media activist for the LGBTQ community who had gone to Cortez after the murder, told the Free Press,
"I was just stunned upon hearing of Sean Murphy's parole. I remember going to the scene of the killing. I will never forget what it looked like to see the outline of a body in the dirt. The ground was soaked in blood. That image will never leave my head."
Sean Murphy now lives in Greeley, Colorado, where he's been restricted from consuming alcohol and intoxicating drugs, according to Colorado Department of Corrections interim spokesman Mark Fairbairn, who has declined to discuss additional specifics of Murphy's supervised release, including curfew or travel restrictions, citing safety concerns.
In a recent interview, Clint Sanchez defends the man he calls his cousin, saying Sean Murphy has served his time and should be free to live his life. He also says that this could happen to anybody, that everyone has some hate in their heart and does bad things at some point, and no one is truly innocent.
Some of which I agree with. Everyone has done something bad in their lives. But to cave in the face of an innocent and helpless 16-year-old, a child. No, not everyone is capable of that type of senseless violence. And to be remorseless afterwards, to actually brag about it? No, that is absolutely not something that could happen to anybody. Those are the actions of a monster. Just like the monsters of the fourth world in Navajo legend. The horned monster that chased people and killed them with his horn. The monster that kicked people off the edge of a cliff. And the monster that killed people by staring at them until they were under his spell. Yes, after emerging through world after world and finding himself in the place where the male river and the female river crossed, two-spirit Fred Martinez truly was killed by a monster.
And that is the story of two-spirit Fred Martinez. We hope it has been informative and that you enjoyed it. Happy Pride Month, everybody, and thanks so much for listening.
Happy Pride Month, everyone. And if you would like to hear more true crime stories from the LGBTQ community, check out our friend CJ's podcast, Beyond the Rainbow. true crime of the LGBTQ. Also, if we mispronounced anything in today's episode or got anything wrong, we sincerely apologize. We're doing the best we can, and you can always let us know at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. You got a case you want us to cover, you just want to say hi, drop us a line. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.